My wife says the marriage isn't working after we moved to her hometown, and her friends told her there are better men out there, but she regrets the kind of man she ends up with. I'm here to ask for advice from the wise community on Reddit about what's going on in my life. I'm 34, a man, married to my 32-year-old wife for 5 years, and we've been together for 8 in total. I hope this information helps. We met in Chicago, where we both had our own lives. She worked in sales and I worked in software development. We had a very good life, a beautiful apartment, a group of friends, and everything was more or less sorted. We were in a happy phase. We couldn't ask for more. But a few months ago, things started to change. My wife started talking more and more about her hometown in Minnesota. She grew up in a small, tight-knit community, and although we visited her family a few times a year, it never seemed like she wanted to move back there. But suddenly, it was all she talked about. At first, it was small things, like, I miss how simple life was back home, or, it would be nice to be closer to family now that my parents are getting older. Her parents are still in good health, but I understand. I didn't pay much attention at first because people get nostalgic about where they grew up, and I thought it was just a passing idea, not something she was really considering. But I could see how much it meant to her, so I started taking it more seriously. I love my wife, and I want her to be happy, so I started thinking about how to make it work for both of us. Her parents live in this small town, and I always liked them, but I've always loved the energy and vibrancy of city life. That's a big part of why I loved living in Chicago. But in the end, we had many deep conversations about it. The more we talked, the more I understood her, though it wasn't easy for me to imagine leaving everything behind. I won't deny that I wasn't a big fan of the idea, especially because I felt like it was a huge change. I was scared to leave everything behind, but over time I could see how much she needed this, and I couldn't ignore it. Besides, the logistics were manageable. My job offers a hybrid model, so I only needed to be in the office a few times a month. This made the idea of moving much more realistic, but still, it didn't make the idea any easier. After months of discussing it back and forth, I finally agreed to move. We packed everything up and moved to her hometown in Minnesota, and that's when things really started to get complicated. The move itself went smoothly, with no major issues. We found a beautiful house, just 10 minutes from her parents. It's not as nice as the apartment in Chicago, but it has a garden and more space overall. My wife was delighted. She devoted herself to reconnecting with her family and old friends, spending almost every day with them. Meanwhile, I tried to adapt, set up an office at home, and tried to find my place in this new community. It wasn't easy. I felt like a stranger in a town where it seems like everyone has known each other forever. Last weekend, there was a local festival in town, something really important around here. My wife was excited because it meant she'd see some of her best friends from high school. She hadn't seen them together in years, and you could tell she was really looking forward to it. When we arrived, she introduced me to them. There were 3, and they were polite enough, but even so, I could tell they didn't like me very much. I can't quite explain it, but the whole vibe was strange. Yesterday, my wife sat down with me for what she called a conversation, and that's when she turned my world upside down. She told me that her friends opened her eyes to our marriage, and I have no idea how we got here so quickly. These are people I've met only once, literally. A brief introduction at a festival, and somehow, in that short time, they decided I'm not good enough for her. According to them, my wife settled for me when we lived in the city because she was afraid of being alone. They also said I don't fit into their tight-knit community and that I'm not the kind of man she always imagined she'd be with. What really hurts is that, instead of defending me or rejecting what they said, my wife told me she's reflecting on it and that maybe they're right. Apparently, their comments made her start thinking about things she had been ignoring in our relationship, and I don't know how long she's been accumulating these ideas. She started listing problems that never were problems before, like me being too focused on work, even though it's my work that's supporting us while she's between jobs, that I don't make enough of an effort to socialize with her friends, that I've been here for some time and barely know anyone. And that really hurt me. We're different people now, after 8 years together, and she tells me this all because of a conversation with friends she reconnected with. I'm now sitting in my home office, looking at the computer and writing this, which seems even more absurd than speaking it. I've given up so much to make this move, left my friends to support her, and left the city I loved, Chicago, just so she could be closer to her family. And now she's questioning if she wants to stay with me. It feels like a cruel joke was played on me. What hurts the most is that I feel completely blindsided. How does someone go from being happy in a marriage to questioning everything just because some old friend said a few things in a conversation? I told her I needed time to think. I really do, but right now I don't even know what to think. I made a huge mistake moving here. Our marriage wasn't as strong as I thought, and if she's so easily influenced by her friends, what does that say about us, about me? This is where you come in. Has anyone ever gone through something like this? If you have any advice on what to do next, I would appreciate it. I came here for advice, and that's what I got. So thank you for that. You don't know how much I value something like this. I'm practically alone here, so I don't have any friends or anyone to talk to about this in person. My decision was to sit down with my wife last night for another conversation. I hoped we could talk and maybe find some common ground. Unfortunately, she didn't see it that way. I told her how hurt I was that she let her friends influence her view of our marriage so quickly and easily. I told her I felt betrayed, especially after I gave up so much to move us here. At first, she just listened to me without saying much, but then she got defensive. That's when she revealed more details about what her friends were saying behind my back. They were pushing the idea that the real men from Minnesota are somehow better than me. They painted the image of the perfect small-town man, outdoor enthusiast, social, involved in every community activity possible, hunter, fisherman, little league coach, whatever. These are the qualities they seem to think are the ideal of what a man should be, especially for someone like my wife, who's now back in her hometown. And then there's me, a software developer, who likes video games, reads, climbs, and has hobbies that she's always known about and never had a problem with. In fact, I remember her admiring me for having these hobbies, calling me a man who takes care of himself. She's always had her own interests too, and I never had a problem with that because we both know it's important to have a personal life and space from each other. But now, out of nowhere, I'm not good enough because I don't fit into this narrow, stereotypical mold that her friends decided is right for her. It's not even her mold, it's one her friends gave her. When I tried to remind her that she's never had a problem with the things I like and that she's always accepted me as I am, her response made things even worse. She told me that by moving back home, she realized what she was missing. And then, as if that weren't enough, she even suggested that maybe I should try to change my hobbies and interests to fit in better with the people here. That's when I really lost my temper. I told her at that moment that I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not just to satisfy her friends. I didn't marry them. One thing is being asked to compromise in a relationship, but it's something very different to be told to change who you are to fit into a mold that a third party came up with. That's not me, and I shouldn't have to change for anyone, not for her, and certainly not for her friends. Naturally, this conversation didn't lead to anything productive. She said she needed space to think and decided to stay at her parents' house for a few days. I agreed to give her the space she asked for, although at this point, I don't know how much she has left to think. A part of me is devastated that we've come to this. Everything is falling apart, and it's all because of her friends, who've brainwashed her, or not even that, because I don't think they had time to do that. She just listened to them and is determined to throw everything away if I don't change. I have to say that part of me is furious that she's letting the opinions of people who barely know me dictate how she feels about me and our marriage. It's one thing to listen to your friends, but to let them guide your relationship like this? I can't understand it. I just don't understand how something as important as our relationship can be so influenced by a group of people who barely know me and certainly don't have my best interests at heart. In the meantime, I've been doing my best to take care of myself. My family, especially my brothers, have been great in giving me support. They believe there's still hope, that maybe this isn't the end, although I'm not so convinced of that. Still, I appreciate them because without them, I'm not sure I'd be able to think clearly. I'm still open to the possibility that she might reconsider, that she'll realize what she's doing is absurd and at least apologize. But, to be honest, my faith in our relationship is beginning to waver. It's hard to keep faith in a relationship that doesn't seem worth it if she can be so easily swayed by what others said. So, I don't know if I should have faith. The few days that my wife said she'd stay at her parents' house have extended into more than a week, and this is only making things worse. She barely communicates with me, and when she does, it's brief and distant messages. We're not having real conversations or discussions about where we stand. There's no effort to work things out. It's as if emotionally she's already checked out. I'm in limbo. Meanwhile, it seems like her friends are taking advantage of this distance. From what I've seen, they've been organizing girls' nights out and, surprisingly, introducing single men from their social circle to my wife. Yes, you read that right. She continues staying at her parents' house but goes out with her friends and meets other men. I wouldn't have known any of this if one of her cousins hadn't reached out to warn me. At least not all the women in this town are as bad as her. This cousin and I have always gotten along, and she said she felt I deserved to know what was happening behind my back. According to her, this group of friends has a history of causing trouble in other people's marriages. It's like they see themselves as an exclusive group from the town, with very rigid ideas about who fits into their circle. My wife's cousin even told me that they've done this before, convincing their married friends that their partners weren't good enough and encouraging them to look for better fish in the sea. This hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, one thing is having opinions about someone's relationship, but actively trying to destroy it is on a whole different level of malice. It's like something out of a horror movie. The more I think about it, the more I realize that these friends have probably been sowing doubts in my wife's mind since we moved here. What really hurts is that she's allowing it. This is not the woman I thought I married. The woman I married was strong, independent, and loyal to her decisions. Now she's acting like she's being influenced by parasites that are taking root in her mind. I can't keep waiting for things to get better. I've scheduled an appointment with a divorce lawyer for next week. I never thought I'd have to take that step, but I need to protect myself if things keep getting worse. Also, I've started looking for apartments in Chicago. I plan to return to the city I love. I left the city because I loved my wife more, but now I don't see the point of staying here anymore. My company has been amazing through all this. They've offered me a full-time position in the office again when I'm ready to return. With that, it will be much easier to move back to Chicago if I finally leave everything behind. It wasn't that long ago that I moved here, but if there's nothing holding me to this city, I don't think it will be very difficult to go through another move. After meeting with the divorce lawyer and having some time to really think things through, I didn't want to make a hasty decision. I realized it was time to take the next step and start prioritizing myself. I sent an email to my wife formally stating my intention to file for divorce. Through all this time, she never showed any interest in trying to repair the relationship, and I can't be sure that she hasn't cheated on me during those nights out. I thought that's what she wanted, as she was actively seeking a way to replace me rather than fighting for our marriage. So what happened after I sent the email really surprised me. She called me a few hours after receiving it, absolutely crying. Between tears, she admitted that she had made a huge mistake. She was admitting that her friends had manipulated her, sowing doubts in her mind. They convinced her to reassess our marriage and to have girls' nights out. She admitted that she had felt torn between her own judgment and the life we had built together, and in the end, she made the wrong choice. I asked about the men who were being introduced to her, and she hesitated for a few seconds to respond because she didn't expect me to know about it all. She thought, since I always stayed home and didn't interact with anyone, I wouldn't find out, but she didn't count on her cousin telling me everything. Finally, she found the words to respond and told me that nothing had happened, that they were just men her friends had invited and that nothing went on. I don't know if it was true, but I was going to speak my truth. I told her that I appreciated her honesty, that I was happy she could see the damage her decisions had caused, but that my decision was final. I couldn't keep putting myself in a position where I had to fight for respect in my own marriage. She was begging me to reconsider, crying even more, but at that point, I wasn't going to change my mind. I said I had waited long enough for her to rethink things, but now I wasn't going to prioritize anyone but myself. Don't think it was easy, but at that moment, I believed it was the best option for me. At another time, I would have thought about what was best for both of us, like I did with the move. But now, there was no reason to keep doing that. Now, I'm officially preparing for my return to Chicago, with my job waiting for me there. It feels like they threw me a lifeline after I fell into a frozen lake here in Minnesota. Some of my former coworkers even offered to help me find an apartment and get settled. The only thing that comforts me through all this is that I'll be able to go back to Chicago, where my friends, family, and life are. And I return with a new lesson learned. Not to leave my life behind for someone else, because when that person tires of you, they abandon you like a dog they no longer want. I started the process of packing up my things, sorting out all the logistics of the move, and gradually saying goodbye to this chapter of my life. There are days when I'm still angry, still hurt, but at the same time, I hadn't realized how suffocated I had been for so long. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that love alone is not enough to keep a marriage. Sure, love is important, but trust, respect, and loyalty are just as crucial, maybe even more. And if you're honest with yourself, you can't stay in a relationship where you're treated like you're not enough. No matter how much love there is, it's hard to admit, but it's the truth. Starting over at 34 is scary. No doubt, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't afraid of what the future holds. But you know, it's scarier to stay in this situation. This kind of life is not sustainable. The divorce process is officially underway. I'm thankful it's relatively simple, as we don't have children, and most of our finances were separate. I've been working with my lawyer to make sure everything is handled fairly and as quickly as possible. At this point, I'm ready to sign the papers and start rebuilding from scratch. I'm not in a hurry, but I'm definitely looking forward to it being over. Curiously, one of the most unexpected sources of support through all of this has been my wife's cousin. She's been very kind, and it's been nice to have someone from the family supporting me. She even apologized for not telling me earlier about how toxic my wife's friends were. I've been talking to her a bit more, and at least she assured me that my wife didn't cheat on me, though it's not something she can confirm 100%. Anyway, it's not like it matters at this point. Part of the divorce agreement is that I won't be paying alimony, and for everything I care about right now, it's just about getting this over with. I'm very grateful to my wife's cousin because not only did she help me with all this and has been a source of support, but she's also become somewhat of a friend I have in this city. She made me feel less alone while I went through the whole process. Because of that, I invited her to visit Chicago. She had never traveled out of state, and she's not the type to want to live here or meet a guy from here, so I told her that if she ever travels, I'd show her my favorite places and restaurants. It's the least I can do for her, after she was my lifesaver. I don't know if I'll have another update, but if I do, it will certainly be when I'm already living in Chicago again. I'm writing this from Chicago, and you don't know how good it feels to say that. I'm in my new apartment and have fully returned to my old routine. I go out with friends, visit my favorite restaurants, and I'm back at the office. The divorce isn't finalized yet, but I don't think it will take long for everything to be over. My wife agreed to the terms, so it's just a matter of some paperwork. I know that in these 2 months, she started seeing someone, which might explain why she didn't contest the divorce or seek reconciliation. Honestly, that's a benefit for me. That she's with someone else right now doesn't matter much to me. It just makes me think I made the right decision. She wanted to be with someone from her town, and that's what she got. I just wanted my life back. After she listened to her friends and probably cheated on me, for those who asked about my wife's cousin, whom I'll call Greta to avoid constantly saying, wife's cousin, I have things to tell. She was in Chicago 2 weeks ago and stayed for a week. It was enough time to get to know the city briefly, although we both agreed that it wasn't enough. We did everything, from visiting museums to trying the famous Chicago-style pizza. I know some people prefer New York's, but we won't agree on that, because I like the one here more, and Greta does too, which is why we get along so well. She liked the city so much that she's planning to move here. She needs to find a job, but I don't think it will be difficult because she graduated from university in Minnesota, which opens up a lot of possibilities. That's also good news for me because I won't deny it, we've developed a kind of connection. I don't know where this will lead us, but we decided to give it a try when she moves here. She knows very well that I won't go back to her city, not even for all the gold in the world. And knowing that she also wants to escape from there because she hates how people are in that place makes me feel even more attracted to her. Maybe I'll come back with another update to tell how things went with Greta, but don't update this too frequently, because it's likely to take a while. I know I said I would tell you about Greta, but I also have other things to share, so this will be an update with a little bit of everything. Greta moved here a month ago, with a job and an apartment. She's as happy to be living here as I am, which doesn't surprise me, because Chicago has something magical. But wait, I'm not just going to talk about the city. She didn't move into my apartment because we wanted to first test how we felt living together, and that's what we've been doing since she arrived. I helped with the move, and we went out to dinner that same night, which we can consider our first official date. Since then, we've been sleeping at each other's apartments a few nights a week. So, you could say things are going well. I can't help but laugh because I went to that city with a wife, and now I've returned with a girlfriend. And it's even funnier because I never would have imagined having a relationship with a woman from that place, especially considering what my ex-wife's friends represented. But I was lucky to meet the only woman from there who likes living in a big city. That move wasn't entirely unproductive. If you think about it, my divorce was finalized, so I can now call my ex-wife and don't need to have contact with her anymore. Well, it's about time, because she might be thinking of coming back now that some things have happened in her city. And when I say coming back, I mean to Chicago, and possibly to our relationship. That's what happens in a small town, where everyone knows everything, and even Greta found out something that, in a big city, would be unthinkable. It turns out that my ex's boyfriend, the man who supposedly had everything her friends wanted for her, also got what he wanted with one of her friends. Do I need to explain what happened? You've probably figured it out, so I'll just assume you did and continue with what I have to share. Now, my ex is the homewrecker of the town, and her friend is no longer her friend because she's now dating my ex's ex-boyfriend. So, I think she might be thinking of coming back since her beloved town might not seem so interesting now. Still, in the 2 months since everything happened, I haven't heard from her, and I hope to keep it that way. I don't think she knows about my relationship with Greta, and I hope she doesn't find out, because I don't want any more drama. Remember I said that Greta and I spent time at each other's apartments? Although technically I've been at hers more than she's been at mine, I don't know, maybe it's time for us to live together. After several months like this is important for the rest of the update. One day, I opened the door to Greta's apartment, where I had spent the night, and found my ex standing there with some suitcases. I was more surprised than she was. Not that she wasn't surprised, but I was having breakfast and didn't expect to see her again. The conversation was awkward, to say the least, but she finally left. She knew Greta had moved to Chicago, but she didn't know I was in a relationship with her. Greta wasn't her first choice, but since there was an important event in the city that weekend, there weren't many hotel rooms available, and she thought her cousin could help her with a place to stay for a few nights. My ex-wife's reaction wasn't as friendly as I'm making it sound. Not that she left without saying a few things, but to be honest, it's not like we care about each other. A guy from her city? It was only fair that I had a woman from mine. I don't think that was my brightest idea, and Greta reminded me of that after her cousin left. Anyway, Greta said she couldn't let her stay there because it would be uncomfortable for her, and I believe my ex, after finding out about my relationship with Greta, also thought the same. She would have tried to go to my apartment if she hadn't been at Greta's house. I don't believe that, because she didn't have the address anyway. If my apartment was her second stop, I'm sure she discarded the idea. The only thing we know about her is that she stayed in the city. That was 2 nights ago, and we haven't heard from her since. She probably found a really expensive hotel to spend the night, one of those that are usually available. And I know my ex-wife is living in the city. I know through mutual friends. Still, she left us in peace and didn't turn into a crazy person.